Greetings, Poe fans. Welcome to our new venture, and it is called Review Morgue. Jeanie, tell us a little
Dun,
bit
dun.
about this.
Well, in this review morgue, we dig up those dead videos back when videos first began, to try to attach them to Edgar Allan Poe, influences from his works, from the man himself, but see how the videos, the movies, whatnot you want to call them, have come about since the beginning up until the most recent times, because even in still today, we have Poe influenced movies. So that's what
Absolutely.
we're going to be reviewing from our own opinions. We're
Yes.
reviewing, how much, who the people are that do this, why they did it, and whether we like them or we don't.
Yes. And we'll talk about that later on in the episode. I do
Mhm.
want to give a shout out because when Jeanie and I were stumbling through trying to think of the name for this portion of the Six Degrees of Poe, we were struggling with the right name. I was talking to my oldest stepdaughter, Sydney, and she says, "Let me think about it." And she came back and said, Review Morgue. It has to be Review Morgue. And we just like fell in love with the name and it stuck.
Yeah, and it has a double connotation because we
Mm,
all know, for the most natural of a morgue, when we think about that, is the place where the dead things lie
yes,
before they move on to a cemetery.
i.e.,
But
creepy background behind me.
exactly. But for instance, most people in the, audiovisual field know that a morgue is where they kept the cans of film because they had to keep them cool.
Yep.
So they kept them in a type of basement that was a cooler temperature so it wouldn't ruin them. So it has its double indemnity there, and we loved it even more. So we're
Yes,
reviewing those that we're digging up out of the morgue.
exactly. And the reason why we're in black and white today is we're going way, way back over a
Mhm.
100 years ago into the early 1900s and the beginning of the film industry. And so Jeannie and I were going back and forth on, I think I kind of wanted to do something newer. And she's like, nope, we're going to start at the beginning. I said, okay, let's do it.
Yeah, I mean, we
So,
had to start at the very beginning, and the irony is that this film that we're about to start with was filmed in 1914, so
yes,
110 years
I
ago.
know, I know.
And
And
not
it's
only
held,
that, wasn't it the year that the Titanic sank?
yes, or was that 1912?
See, I always get those mixed. It's either April 12th, 1914, or April 14th, 1912. I
I
always
think
got those backwards.
I
Whoever
think
knows.
it's yeah, I think it's yeah, April 14th, 1912. But we'll have
Okay,
to
one of
we'll
those
have to
two.
fact check that later. But yeah, that is easy to get mixed up.
Exactly. So all I know is it's over 110 years ago, and you have to know that this is way, way, way back in the very, very beginning.
Yes, and what I was going to add is that the quality of the film, and keeping in mind in the context of when this was
Mhm.
filmed, it is held up very well. Watching it I was surprised that the quality was as good as it was. I was kind of worried about it being really sketchy looking and things like that.
Yeah, and I think that might actually go to both the director and
Hmm.
the company that was putting
Yes.
it together, because they
Mhm.
were very determined to have the best and to do the best and be above and, beyond the others. And it, the special effects and the stuff that we think of today, they still have some things. Like I was reading a little bit about the cameraman and the people that they did, and how
Mhm.
they had to, I mean, he had to wait, kind of like National Geographic photographers today,
Yeah.
how they set up and they wait and they wait and they wait and they wait so they can get the perfect shot.
Yeah, and that makes sense. It totally does.
And
Well,
so that's what they had to do.
yeah, before we talk about the actual film, we're going to talk
Mhm.
about the director, and it was D.W. Griffith. And
Yes.
he was born January 22nd, 1875, and he died from a brain hemorrhage July 23rd, 1948. So he lived a good long while. He saw the heyday of the kind of the golden years of Hollywood, and
Mhm.
he had a hand in getting all that started, which is really cool.
Yeah, and as many, he did not start out wanting to be a director. He
Right.
himself wanted to be an actor,
Mm-hmm.
but he found that he got better, what can we say, review with being behind the scene rather than being in front of the camera, because
Right.
this is, again, like we said, when we talk about Poe and Poe's parents, who both were actors
Mm-hmm.
on the stage, this was moving away from stage into, photography was no longer just photography.
Right.
It was moving pictures. That's what they called them, moving pictures, because they figured
Yes.
out they could roll it and roll it and roll it and do the exposure to make
Mm-hmm.
real life. Now, I
Right.
don't want to get too far into the scientifics behind it, because that's just too boring, in my opinion, for most people,
Yeah.
unless
We
you really love that type of thing.
Exactly, exactly. And so, what kind of spurred him to become an actor was that his father kind of lost basically their whole house and everything. He grew up, D.W. Griffith grew up in a farm in Kentucky. And by the
Mm-hmm.
time he came along, his father was telling him stories of being a doctor. He was a prospector looking for gold at one point, and he was even a state legislator. And so D.W. Griffith was like, oh, I love all these stories. And so then his sister became basically his teacher. That's where he got his education. And so between his father and his sister, that kind of grew his love of curiosity, and he loved the stage. And so that's where he kind of got his start as a stagehand, and then jumping in to become an actor. And he was an avid reader. He loved reading everything. And I think, Jeannie, you were going to talk about his love of Poe.
Yeah, he was so enamored with Edgar Allan Poe and his writing and everything, that his poetry, his prose, how he crafted a story. And I
Mhm.
think it goes back with what you're saying, that he fell in love with the stories of all the different things that was going on with his father and his
Mhm.
life and everything else. And of course, like anything else, the love that Poe put into his work, like for Annabel Lee and all the other women, and the forbidden love, and
Mhm.
how he just saw himself, and I'm just going to throw this out here, he saw himself so much into who Poe was and what his writing was, and
Yeah.
all the tragedy and all the story and his love, and how he couldn't reach his love. And DW could also put this into his own life, because he wasn't able to fulfill his dream of being in front of the camera.
Right.
So he wanted to put what his second love, and put that there for everybody else to see. And who better than Edgar Allan Poe to tell a story with.
Absolutely.
And horror especially, because DW, this was like the beginning of the horror genre that
Mm-hmm.
nobody knew, that nobody recognized, nobody had any kind of elements in these new pictures of the macabre and all that, the strange, the unexplainable, the things like heaven and hell and skeletons and death and all that
Yeah.
wonderful stuff. And this was back before Frankenstein. This was like the precursor to the horror of
Mm-hmm.
Frankenstein.
Yes, because I
Because
believe those
Frankenstein is
movies were,
1931.
yes, yeah, and Dracula, all of those came out about that same time.
Yes, and I mean they did try one in Frankenstein in 1910, but it just didn't go anywhere.
It didn't
So
stick together.
exactly, they didn't put the lighting. They didn't put the right lighting into. Okay,
Yeah, exactly.
they
Yes,
didn't power it up correctly. But anyway, so
yes.
he took different aspects of Poe's works, and in my opinion, kind of crammed them all together to create this hour. How long was it? Is hour and 12 minutes, or
Oh no, it was hour and 24. You're close.
that's
Yeah,
right. I was close.
hour and 24 minutes.
Yes, of a
Yes.
silent film. I mean, silent. No,
Yes.
no music. Now there are aspects of people that have taken it and added their own like music to it and everything,
Yes,
but
which I watched, and I'm also going to add a couple more things about DW just so people have some more context because I don't think many people might not know a lot about him. Just depending on how much you're into film and early film.
yeah.
But he joined a touring company and met his future wife. Her name was Linda Arvidson Johnson, and they married in 1906. And then he basically started kind of his real true acting career at a company called Biograph, which was the first American film company. And then he quickly started directing after that, which we've talked about. And the first film he produced or directed was 1908, The Adventures of Dolly, and it gained total fame, garnered him a contract with the company to keep directing, and he just was putting out film after film after film during that. He's credited with using some of the techniques that are still used today, like subtitles, night
Mhm.
photography, the still shot, camera pans, fade outs, and close ups, which I believe we saw in this film we're about to talk about. And
Oh,
then
absolutely.
what's then in 1915, he had a little bit of a setback with the film The Birth of a Nation, which many people have probably heard of.
Mhm.
Created a huge controversy based on what it was about. And
Mhm.
so that kind of set him back a little bit. But then in 1919, previously, when he was working as a director around the time of The Adventures of Dolly, he actually hired Mary Pickford. She is the reason she became the actress that she did. She started with him, and he paired with her, Charlie Chaplin, and Douglas Fairbanks to create United Artists. So that was huge.
Yeah, and it's even more interesting to understand when you talk about how he had a hiccup with
Yeah,
his Birth of a Nation.
right.
Was when we think about it now, I attribute to like when you think of 9/11, those of
Mm-hmm.
us that lived through it and experienced it, and even if we go farther back to the Challenger explosion
Yeah.
that we lived through.
Mm-hmm.
For those that were in the time and experienced it, you still have those remnants, or even if you're just one generation removed from it, you
Right.
still are in it.
Mm-hmm.
So during this during this Civil War epic that he put on, it
Mm-hmm.
still was it was less than 50 years since
Exactly.
the end of the Civil War.
And
So there was so
sensitivities
much.
were still very strong.
Yes, and many people don't know this, but the last seceded state from the Union did not get accepted back into the United States of America until 1870.
Yeah, and that's really crazy to think about.
Yeah. So I mean, even after the end of the Civil War, not all the states just picked up and said, "Okay, it's done. We're good. Let's all go back and, kumbaya."
Yeah.
No, it took many years for all those 13 states to finally, Tennessee was the only one that came back into the Union before the end of the Civil War. But the
Mm-hmm.
others, it took many, many tries and many tribulations before they got back. So
Yeah.
D.W. Griffith, and this is what's so funny, he was such a man before his time. He
Yes.
also had so much like Edgar Allan Poe.
Yeah.
He was doing things that not a lot of people liked with most of his stuff. He caused
Mm-hmm.
controversy. He, he was a visionary, I guess is
Yeah.
the word I'm looking for.
And he created ways of film production that was not being used. And so,
Mm-hmm.
he, just like Poe, is the father of the detective story.
Yep.
D.W. Griffith created all of these different camera shots, which they are still used in every film today. He was a groundbreaker in the film industry, and we owe him a
Absolutely.
lot based on that fact. And
Yep.
so I guess, Jeannie, we need to get to talking about this movie. And it kind of has two titles: The Avenging Conscience and Thou Shalt Not Kill.
Yeah, so and I think they threw in "and thou shalt not kill" of for the religious connotation to it.
Absolutely. And we'll talk about the religious allusions that took place in the movie in a little bit, because that was
Yeah,
further into the film. So,
and I did enjoy that the Avenging Conscience. Just
yes.
that just that title itself gives you some idea of what to expect from the movie.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
But most people, they say that it's a good movie to watch around Halloween.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you like that, if you like silent movies and can sit through them,
Absolutely.
most people probably wouldn't have the attention span to watch it straight through in today's time due to the cinematography. but
That's true. That's true.
but this was Griffith's fifth feature length film.
Mm-hmm.
And feature length film, when I was thinking about that, it didn't even dawn on me that they would be over an hour long because they're silent movies.
See, I
I
felt
was
the
I was thinking
same.
like 20-30 minutes.
That's where I was thinking as well when I, brought it up to watch it. And I was kind of shocked. I was like, wow, this is an hour and 24 minutes. And
Mm-hmm.
so, many times when I'm watching movies, I will do other things. I'll have hands sewing, that I'm working on. I was focused in the entire hour and 24 minutes because I didn't want to miss anything since we were reviewing this. And I was just, it was just really weird thinking about it being silent, and more so one of the earlier silent films, and how it was done. And I know that's one thing you and I were talking about before we started our episode, was that we were expecting more of the word cards. Jeannie, is there a technical name for that I'm forgetting?
How cue cards
Cue cards,
basically is
yes.
what they would be called
Yeah.
behind the scenes. So it's the same thing. I'm pretty sure that they call them in the
Yeah.
screen
Yeah.
also.
To
Either
me,
that or
they're
screen cards.
yeah, they there weren't enough of those showing their dialogue, and they were really more kind of like, they weren't subtitles, but they were more along the line of chapter titles, in my opinion. And
Yeah, they did not give a lot of information about what you were actually seeing, like a scripted dialogue.
yeah, you had to infer based on what was the basically the body language
Hmm.
and the emotions of the actors of what was taking place during the film.
Yes, and it's like I was telling you at the very beginning when we were talking before we started recording. The first thing that struck me when I was watching this was how this would be the equivalent if you were deaf
Mm-hmm.
and you were watching and had to pay attention to people's body language to
Yeah,
get the emotion and get the story.
yeah,
So you had to truly pay attention to
the
everything that was
entire
going on.
time. Yes,
Exactly.
absolutely, absolutely.
Ex- So it was very in depth,
Yeah,
in depth with
it,
the stories.
I agree, and just the plot line, it basically is this mother. I'm assuming she was probably the sister of the uncle,
Mm-hmm.
and she dies leaving her son. And so the uncle raises the son. The uncle has a thriving business, he has money, basically gives the son everything he wants. And then the son gets old enough and he finds this lady that lives a couple doors down and wants to be with her. And the uncle doesn't really like her very much, thinks of her as a common woman. I think that is was one of the screen cards that came up.
Yep.
And so things twist around based on the nephew, and he breaks up with her, but then he changes his mind and things go awry.
Yes, they go very awry. And the
Yes.
interesting parts of this is that uh yeah, it's a he's a controlling uncle.
Yes.
He there is a part to where he actually refers to his lady love, the nephew,
Yeah.
as Annabelle.
Yes, and I think I wrote down it's the lady he named Annabelle.
Yeah.
So it was like that wasn't really her name, but because of the poem by Poe, Annabelle Lee,
Mhm.
that's why he called her Annabelle.
Yes. And so yeah, a lot of it, like in the very beginning when he's working with his uncle and the
Mm-hmm.
area that you see where he's coming in and the way they're working together, I get a remnant feel of Charles Dickens' a
Yes.
Christmas Carol with
Yes.
Scrooge and you know how he treats uh Tiny Tim's father, Cratchit.
Yes.
What's
Bob Cratchit. Yeah.
Yeah,
I,
Bob
I
Cratchit.
I got that too, and I will say another one of D.W. Griffith's uh, writers that he really loved was Charles Dickens. So that may have kind of come out of that
Yes, it's got that definite cross
vibe.
there because Poe
Mhm.
was a Dickens fan too.
Yeah.
So,
Oh yeah.
uh, but the one thing that I enjoyed the most is if you pay attention to some of the nuances like that, for instance, then you
Hmm.
also get a lot of different poems and stories of Poe's that are interspersed with it because you get
Yes.
the detective. There's a
Hmm.
detective in here. You
Hmm.
get the bricking up.
Yeah. Well,
You know,
let's save that. But yes, definitely.
but we don't want to give the whole story away, but we do want to, because trust me, anybody that wants to take the time to watch this, we want you to have the full experience. We don't want you to just.
Absolutely. And one other thing, too, I was going to add was when you look at kind of the description about this and how it's connected to Poe, it says it's, adapted from Annabelle Lee as well as The Telltale Heart. And one of
Mhm.
the other nuances that I noticed too was that it was like the nephew was, in a way, he was the, unreliable narrator in the story of The
Mhm.
Telltale Heart, The uncle was the old man. He had an eye patch. He didn't have a pale blue
Yeah.
eye, but I love that he had an eye patch. And I thought that was really clever on Griffith's part, adding that in. And
Well, it would make sense because since it's black and white, you wouldn't be
right.
able to get the color.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So I thought that was really, really cool that he did that.
Yeah.
And so, what else, Jeannie, were you going to say? I think I may have interrupted you.
No, that's okay. I was just going to say that with the eye patch, of course, being, the telltale heart influence, then you've
Hmm.
got the bricking up that occurs. I won't tell, how or why, but you
Right.
have the remnants of that from Pose. Uh,
Hmm.
and the actor himself that plays the nephew is
Yes.
so much of this, not really cowardly, but this sickly, uncourageous, no name kind of beat down kind of person. One of
Hmm.
the, not somebody who would stand up for himself, but
Right.
somebody who was, you know, always getting put down and not taken seriously, I guess is what
Yeah.
I'm trying to get to. And
Yeah.
then he even comes to the point to where he pushes Annabelle away.
Yeah.
He chooses his uncle because his uncle basically gives him an ultimatum,
Hmm.
stay away from the woman, and all that kind of stuff.
She's just after
So
your money, basically. And
exactly the
mhm.
typical story there.
Yeah.
But I really enjoy it. There are the interspersed cards that actually quote from Poe's work.
Yeah. I
They're,
loved that. That was really awesome. And it fit
yeah,
well with the scenes that they were put placed near.
yeah, that was the one thing that really started interesting me more
Hmm.
is when it wasn't just like these one liners of like the stranger you'll see again.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then they'll say the name of the actor that portrayed the stranger, but the
Hmm.
stranger didn't have a name. It
Yeah.
just, you'll see the stranger later. It's like, okay, then why did you stick that up there? What the what and the what?
Oh, I know.
So
And I was waiting for names to be given to the characters, and the
yeah,
only one that had a name was Annabelle. And
yes,
that
that
wasn't
was the
even
only
her real name, but that's what the nephew wanted to call her. And very, very
yeah,
poetic.
yes, and the whole thing, it it started getting very interesting, especially after the nephew finally just had a meltdown and
Goes
just
mad.
couldn't do it. Yeah, it
Yeah.
just went nuts, basically.
Hmm.
Uh,
Absolutely. He decides that he's going to go after what he wants and not
mhm,
what the uncle wants. And he really sets the uncle up
mhm.
to cover the nephew's tracks.
Yes. And so what's so funny is the stranger does show up, and the stranger is the reason why the nephew starts getting all this grief
Hmm.
because he's like, where did the uncle go? What happened to the uncle? And of course, then you got the detective that shows up and it starts berating him or badgering him, rather, not
Hmm.
berating, but badgering him about the uncle's disappearance. And
Yes.
and the one thing that I never could understand is how these guys that showed up, the only thing that he referred to him as was the Italian.
Yes. The one that basically blackmailed the nephew.
Yeah,
Hmm.
he was just the Italian. It's like,
Yes.
okay. All right. Well, I mean,
Yes.
no names, just references to the people like the stranger, the Italian, the detective. Like
Mm-hmm.
you said, Annabelle was the only one that even truly had any kind of moniker of a name,
Right.
but that in itself wasn't her name.
Absolutely. And kind of talking about the detective because of how closely adapted the story was from The Telltale Heart. I
Mhm.
loved the scene where the nephew broke because of how the detective was handling the questioning. That was brilliantly done. I really liked that part a lot.
I did too. But it was the ending or pre-ending or close to
Yeah.
ending or
Yeah,
whatever.
don't give away the real ending because that will
Well,
spoil
I'm
the
not.
whole thing for our viewers and
I'm
listeners.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say that not only did we veer from Charles Dickens and the Edgar Allan Poe tie,
Hmm.
but I got a feel of William Shakespeare thrown in there.
Okay, yeah, I could see that a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, and it had that, and I'm going, really? Really?
Oh, yeah. And there was another poem, which I'm not going to say which one because it would give away what the real ending is. But there is
Mm,
another Poe poem that I really felt like Griffith could have used some lines from. And Jeannie, you know which one I'm talking about.
uh-huh.
And it would have been apropos totally in right
Yep,
after that scene and or at the very end of the film.
absolutely. Because I think that the end of the film, that was very much a nod to that poem.
I agree. I totally agree without
It couldn't
actually
be
showing
anything
it.
else.
Yeah.
Could not be anything else.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
will say that I was rather disappointed
Hmm.
of the lackluster ending.
Yeah.
I
I
mean, I can see why he did it, and I mean, he very much paid homage to Poe
hmm.
with how he created it,
Yeah.
because it fit with another poem of Poe's that
Hmm.
was very popular.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it was like, really, really. You could have done so much with this because you had brought in all the other aspects of the horror genre, but you just kind of, eh.
Made it a romantic ending, not in the gothic sense, but the Hollywood sense. It was like, we're going to go ahead and Hollywood this up, as I call it,
Mhm.
before people were actually doing that and giving a happy ending to the whole story. And so that part I was disappointed in too. I was like, no, they're not going to do it like this. And so, but again, I
Yeah,
don't want
because
to
there
give.
was actually two endings, and it's like the final ending that he put on there, like you said, was a Hollywood ending. And
Yes.
it's like, are you kidding me?
Yep.
Are you kidding me? It just, that's one of the things that made me so upset. And I'm like,
Yeah.
really?
But
You had the perfect, it was
oh
just
yeah.
pretty good.
Well, and one thing I also want to go back to is when the the whole decision of the nephew in his mind, it was all psychological, all mental, as he was
Mm-hmm.
going through his stages of what do I do about the uncle. And he was sitting on a bench, and then he sees this spider. He sees the spider get the fly. He sees these ants destroying all these things. And
Mm-hmm.
so that reference of the spider and the fly was so comparable to what he and the uncle, what he was thinking about doing with the uncle. And I loved those comparisons that Griffith did and adding that actual footage in the film of the spider and the fly.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that we were alluding to at the very beginning that I was telling you with the
Mm-hmm.
cameraman,
Yes,
that
yes.
he was talking about, that one shot of the spider and the fly and the ants took
Mm-hmm.
him forever
To
to
get.
finally get.
Yeah.
And it's like they couldn't do like they do now, where they can redo it over and over and over again, or touch
Mm-hmm.
it up with computers or whatever. No, he literally had to wait hours and days to get the perfect shot that would fit.
Yeah.
And once he got it, that was it. There was no retake, nothing. He had to
Mm-hmm.
get it the first time, and that was it.
Yeah, and what just amazed me is that thinking about 1914 and having that footage of the spider eating the fly on
Mhm.
film for people to see, back then that probably was horrific to look at, because that's
Mhm.
not something people go out seeking to look at, unless you're, a kid that thinks that's kind of cool. That's
Yeah.
not something I go look for. I think it's like, oh, I almost turned my head away when it happened in the movie.
I don't know, that's pretty much something that we would see now on a National Geographic station, like
Yeah, yeah,
Animal Planet or something.
I
It
know.
it's not something that we would seek out or want to see. Or
Yeah,
if we did see it in the movies, we knew it was computer generated.
right. And this was very real. You could tell.
Yes. Although I did like that one part where I'll just say the skeleton and just leave it at that.
Mm-hmm.
It's very brief, but it's
Yeah,
something that you're going, really?
yeah.
Okay.
Well, and the supernatural element, the way they did it with using the uncle, was, I thought, very well done for 1914. But again, D.W. Griffith, using some of the things that he did to make special effects work back then, as we see it nowadays, it's going to be like, oh, look at how old that looks. But it was, to me, very well done and holds up well even 110 years later.
Absolutely. And it's something that you just would not think that would be around 110 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That when you think about it, you're like,
I was
really?
surprised to see how that came out on the film. Another thing that I thought the actors did very well with, especially the nephew, because of the lack of the screen cards of showing dialogue. And you had to, again, like we said, you have to really infer kind of what's going on. The nephew, especially, his reactions and his facial expressions, especially his eyes. I wrote down one part, crazy eyes,
Yes.
when he, right before he decides what he's going to do. I was just like blown away at how captivating his performance was. And we were going to tell you who the actors were. Henry B. Walthall,
Yes.
Spotswood Aitken, and Blanche Sweet were the main actors in this film. I had never heard of them until Jeannie and I watched this. Now, granted, Jeannie and I watched this at separate houses. It would have been, I think it would have taken us like 5 hours to pause it and talk about it.
Oh, yeah.
We had watched it together. But yeah, to me, there was some overacting, especially with Annabelle. She kind of really was, but the
The
nephew,
melodramatic was,
yes,
yeah, is
thank you, yes,
melodrama.
yeah,
Yeah. It's
but
melodrama to the max.
the nephew's acting ability was spot on. I really thought.
Yeah, he actually used his body language and facial expressions to tell that
Story,
you didn't need those cue cards at that point. You could
no,
see it on his face and feel it.
yeah,
The just, I can't believe I'm doing this. What am I going to do? How is, all this kind of stuff. So he started out stale. He started
hmm,
out very static, in my
yes,
opinion, at the beginning.
hmm,
But it's like once he and Annabelle split, and he made the decision. It's like you could see the madness and the anger and just the heartbreak
Yeah.
of the choices he was making.
Absolutely. And the nephew was played by Henry Walthall. So I just wanted
Yeah,
to make sure I listed the actors and actress, but didn't say who was who. And then
yeah,
Spotswood Aitken was the uncle, and then
yeah.
Blanche Sweet was Annabelle.
Yes, Blanche
And
Sweet wasn't, and I think if I remember correctly when I was reading it,
mhm,
Henry Waffle was a little bit more known
okay,
as an actor at that time.
yeah,
He wasn't a big kind of actor because he didn't fit what most of the others needed or wanted at the time. He wasn't.
mhm,
It's kind of like in today's cinema. In today's cinema, we have
yeah,
people, the superheroes or the big buff guys or the badasses and all
mhm,
this kind of stuff. But when you think, when I think of it, when I was reading it, I was thinking of the Pale Blue Eye, where Dursley
yeah,
played Edgar Allan Poe's, and he does not fit what you would picture if somebody like playing Iron Man or
yeah,
something.
yeah,
So that's one thing that I read about Henry Wathel was he was a good actor, but he kind of did not fit
mhm,
what other people wanted. Now I did read where there was a portion of the movie where you had a maid and a guy that was delivering groceries. This was back before Instacart.
yes, yes,
Those two actors, even though they weren't, you know, put and popularized in the movie,
mhm,
they were two very popular actors of the time.
okay,
And D.W. Griffith actually would cast them quite a bit, or they would be used in a lot of other productions, but they were waiting for their film to start. So he just kind of stuck them in the film, but didn't really give them any credits.
yeah, yeah. And I mean, and they, like you and I were talking about, their whole scene was not necessary to the plot of the
Uh-uh.
movie or what even secondary or tertiary to the
Yep.
plot of the movie. And so that when you told me that, that makes so much more sense. That's why they were in there.
Yeah, because honestly, the one guy, I can't remember their names. I didn't look too closely because they weren't main characters or anything.
Right, right. Oh, well, actually, Mae Marsh played the
Yeah.
maid, and Robert Heron played the grocery boy.
Yeah,
So,
I remember her first name because she reminded me of Mae West, but
yeah, yeah.
excuse me. But the grocery guy,
Mm-hmm.
you can see he's got that look, that
Yeah,
Hollywood look as she does.
I
Whereas
agree. Yes.
and but yeah, then Annabelle, the actress, kind of disappointed me greatly with her overacting the
Yeah.
melodramatic play, and it was like, are you kidding me? Really?
Yeah, but from
Without sound.
others, yeah, from other silent films I've watched, a lot of the actresses and actors did over dramatize some of
Oh
their
yeah.
actions. But yeah, she was not my favorite. And two, now this is just a thing in my head, is I always think of Annabelle Lee with dark hair, and she was blonde. And so that kind of, threw me off a little bit, but it's to each their own interpretation. So there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah,
But
and
yeah,
plus it's a black and white film, so
yeah. And
even
so,
though you could tell she had lighter hair just because it was so light on the film,
right, right,
it was still like, it wasn't like it is today. It wasn't necessary to know what color hair, like if they were redheaded, green eyed, or
right.
blonde and blue eyed, or
Yeah. Oh, I
all that
agree.
stuff.
And
So
because I was thinking Mae Marsh, who played the maid, I was like, man, her acting skills in just that little bitty part that she played, she probably would have been a great Annabelle in the movie.
Yeah, and I think he probably would have cast her if she had not been waiting for another movie to start.
Right. That makes sense. And how often do some actors have to turn down parts to be in other things that they've already promised or signed off to do? And so that it was happening at the very beginning, it sounds like, with those kinds of things.
Oh yes, oh yes, they have, and back then they would do filming that would last for like only 2 days or a
Yeah.
week,
Right.
like
Hmm.
it does today, where they film everything in weird orders.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, not necessarily chronological, just whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, back then they had to film it as it was happening. Like when I talked about the cameraman, he even made a point of saying, yes, he said, I had to wait if I needed a cloudy day in the scene. He said, I
Hmm.
literally had to wait for a cloudy day before I could film anything.
Yeah. I mean, that, and yeah, you have to, weather is not always cooperative.
Exactly. Weather
uh,
was not on his side.
no. And one other thing that we were going to bring up was when the nephew is going through his struggle after what happens to the uncle,
Mm-hmm.
he really, the way he portrays it is done very well, of someone suffering guilt.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed the aspects of the religious illusions of, they added in Jesus, they added in demons, the devil, and
Mm-hmm.
that was very well done, the way he Griffith put that in there.
And it matches very well with the name of the movie, The Avenging Conscience,
Yes, yes, absolutely.
because it
I
was
feel like
his
that's where it
remorse.
came out. Yeah,
Yes. His remorse is what really showed the most.
yeah,
And that was a great connector to the name of the film.
yeah. I thought so too. And they even "Thou shalt not kill" was even thrown in as well during that whole kind of, I would call it like a montage, a religious montage that of his going through his guilt.
Exactly, because, like you said, they threw in the demons, the devil, the good, the bad. So why not
Mhm.
throw in the deadly sin that put you there?
Absolutely. And it was almost like they were doing, the devil on one shoulder and the angel on the other, telling, oh, you should feel bad, or oh no, don't feel bad, before that kind of skit type thing had been ever done. It was like an early version of it, in my opinion.
Yeah. And it's just like anything else. We all have those different voices in our head telling us good and bad.
Yeah,
So it's
absolutely.
like, should we give in and do the bad, or should we stay true and do the good?
Right. And how should I feel about it? Yeah.
Mhm. So
Well,
putting that on the silent film screen was excellent.
mhm.
So,
Yeah. So I think with this particular film, I'm glad we chose this one to start with. I think it
mhm.
was the way Griffith put it together, the cinematography aspect of it, I really truly enjoyed. And the acting, for the most part, I thought was very well done as well. I mean, the uncle was great, the detective, the Italian, everybody played their part like you would think in this particular story. And the connections to Poe, with kind of adapting the Telltale Heart, throwing in some elements of Annabelle Lee and Jeanie. One other poem that was listed, which you looked up, was "To One in Paradise," was
Yes,
also intertwined throughout on the screen cards.
absolutely. And it was not just, you know, what was the word I was going to look for?
I don't know.
Well, it was a telltale heart. It was a, remnant of that. It was a remnant of Annabelle Lee. It had some aspects of a dream within a dream. That's what I was getting at.
Yeah, yeah.
What was the other one that he really paid homage to?
Well, he added in on the screen cards to One in Paradise, and that was more talking kind of through the love that he and Annabelle had, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, I mean, as far as matching to the story with
Mm-hmm.
the cue cards, he definitely did that with using that poem.
Yeah,
But an allusion to another work, to me, with the way the actor portrayed with his remorse, with his
mm-hmm.
conscience, it brought out a dream within a dream.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And we alluded to that earlier. We didn't want to give too
Yeah,
much away, but yeah, I absolutely.
yeah.
And
Those are the main ones that I think everyone needs to know. It's kind of like when we did the reflection on the Netflix of Follow the House of Usher, where you're
yeah.
trying to see where all the little nuances are.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
I agree. I like this adaptation. To me, of the main part was the Telltale Heart and the way it was done. Just some adaptations, changes, however you want to say it.
yep.
It just, for 1914, Griffith did a great job adapting the story,
Yeah, an
and
interpretation,
yeah,
not just adaptation, but
yes.
interpretation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for the most part, he hired the right people to act in
Absolutely.
it.
Yeah.
He did.
I mean, it fit very well. And I think if you are a Poe fan and you really want something that you want to watch so you can try to be like a scavenger hunt of Poe, this
Mm-hmm.
would be a good film to
Yeah,
get to.
I agree. It's a good one to start with. If you look at all the list of Poe films, this is a good one to start with, just like
Yeah.
we did.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons why we chose to do it in chronological order, because we want
Mm-hmm.
to we want to start from the beginning and work our way up to the most recent so we can do a comparison from
Mm-hmm.
each one.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And so, what we decided to do is at the end, and neither Jeannie nor I have discussed this aspect of it. All we did was decide what we were going to use to rate the film for
mhm.
Review Morgue. And so, all the positives are going to be Raven Caws, and like, or Croaks, we said
Yes,
Croaks.
Raven Croaks.
Yes, and if there's something we don't like, it's going to be a black cat hiss
Yeah.
to go
So,
along with
like it,
Poe.
instead of the thumbs up or the thumbs down, this is
Right.
what we decided that would fit very well with our 6 degrees of Poe connection.
Yes. And so we're going to do it with, if we totally love it, it's going to be 6 Raven Croaks. That's like the ultimate. But
Mhm.
some films can have a little bit of both. And so, or some could have like, you
All
know,
six black cat
yes.
hisses.
So, Jeannie, do you want to go first?
Sure. My
Okay.
review of The Avenging Conscience of 1914 would be 2 Raven Croaks and 3 Black Cat Hisses.
Okay. And I knew when we were talking about this earlier that I think enjoyed this a little bit more than you
Mhm.
did. And so I'm going to give this one 3 raven croaks and 1 black cat hiss.
Okay.
I
Well,
like,
and it also could be because you watched it where there was actually music with it.
yes, yeah,
Maybe,
we should.
maybe if I, yeah, maybe
That's
if I had done that, it would have changed my review.
I think so too, because one the other thing that we need to tell our audience is that you can find this on YouTube. It's free, and that was
Yeah.
another great reason to look at this film first and review it. So if you want to go watch it after you watch this, or watch the film and then watch our review, it's free. So you can look it up pretty easily. And so it just, yeah, I think I chose a version that had music added to it. And so whomever did the music really did a great job, especially in the suspense areas, because it was just kind of
Mhm.
some nice music as you're going along. And then all of a sudden you knew when the suspense happened. Like if I had gotten up to go refill my water, I would have like said, "Oh, hold on, I got to run back in there," and I should have hit pause on it. But just to say that the music really was great cues on what to expect next.
Yes. And I mean, that's what I was kind of thinking of when I thought of the other silent, because I was a big silent film person when it came
Mhm.
to Westerns.
Okay.
And
Okay.
I loved it because those they would have kind of like what they did with the radio shows where they would have the kind of the special effects.
Yeah.
Um, but they would have the cue cards that would come up like, oh no,
Hmm.
and then you could see you'd see the train and you'd see the person that was struggling on the tracks, and then you'd see them again go, help, help. And you could vision that and hear that clanking of the train on the tracks in your own
Yes.
head.
Getting
And I
closer
think
and
that was
closer. Yeah.
exactly. And I think that's one of the things that I missed in this film is that, yes, I could interpret what the body language was doing. It's just that there were no other noises or sounds that could add to it
Yeah.
in my head that would make it more
Yeah.
suspenseful or more intriguing, I guess is the word. So
Yeah.
that's why I ended up giving it so many black cat hisses.
Yes. And
Exactly.
so I highly recommend watching it with the music added,
Mhm.
because it really makes it more enjoyable. Definitely.
Yeah.
You
Yes,
would have a different opinion maybe with watching it
maybe.
with the music. You still may think of it exactly like you thought of it.
Yeah, I think now would be too late for me to try to watch it with the news.
I agree. Yeah, it's one of those things that if you went back to it, if you just were, enjoyed it enough to watch it again, watch it with music. But I think for your opinion of it, I don't think it's going to change that much at this point.
No,
Yeah.
no, it's not. So, but that's okay. It
Hmm.
was our first review. It was the first movie that we could find in our IMDb that was a uh homage to
Yes.
Edgar Allan Poe.
Hmm.
So
Absolutely.
I think
And
we did a good start there.
I think so too. And a couple things we want to remind everybody. Don't
Hmm.
forget Poe Unplugged on July 30th, 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. If you go on our website, sixdegreesofpoe.com, you can register for it, read A Descent into the Maelstrom, and be prepared to talk about it the night of July 30th. And make sure that you or we I would say I've already talked about signing up, but the Zoom link will be sent out the morning of the event.
Absolutely. And we will be continuing our review morgue from now on once a month. It will be a
Yes.
new episode of its own.
Mm-hmm.
It's a divergent of the 6 degrees, but not too far.
Yes, yes, it's yes.
It's a parallel. It's more of a parallel. We'll call it a parallel.
Okay, yes, we're on a parallel universe. And what's funny that you say that is, I've mentioned this. I'm in the mode of watching Dark Shadows,
Mm-hmm.
and we just left parallel time. And so
Yep.
it's very apropos.
Very much so.
Yes. And one other reminder, if you are listening or watching this review, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Poe Unplugged. Like it, subscribe, and you'll get all of these awesome videos and audio files to listen and watch. And we always add in other little fun videos as well, the little shorts to keep you interested.
Exactly.
So,
You can keep up with our world of Poe.
yes, absolutely. Well, Jeanie, on that note, I think we are
Oh.
out.